Hi, this video is about the new Lucee version 5.3 or Lucee Kabang. First of all, what stands Kabang for? Every Lucee version gets a name of a famous dog that helped mankind. In that case, it's a dog that saved two kids from a motorcycle accident. To get more information about that, follow this link. The main focus of Lucee 5.3 was to improve the administrator and the debugging output, something you all deal all day with. So first of all, the administrator. We added system metric information to the admin, so you have a short overview of what is going on your system. That looks like this. So first of all, you have some graphs. You see what the memory is doing on the system, what the CPU is doing on the system. Then you get detailed information about your scopes, your requests, what requests are running, how many database connections are open, how many tasks are open, and so on. So all helpful information on the spot. The second thing is what we changed it in the admin is how you deal with updating Lucee and extension in the administrator. So first of all, I'm switching to the server administrator and we go to the applications. You may are familiar with that. You see the extensions you already have installed, and here are the extensions that you can install. You see that it's divided in three parts. You see releases, pre-releases, and snapshots. So you see there are 8 releases, 2 pre-releases, and 1 snapshot, and you can enable them as you like. For example, I do enable the pre-releases, but I don't want to see the releases, and I also add the snapshots, so I can enable all of them. Lucee 5.2 only had releases, that there was no pre-releases and snapshots for extensions, so that's also a change we have with 5.3. You can handle all this different kind of updates. Same with the installed extensions. So I have, for example, an installed cache. When I go inside that, I see there are 10 releases available for that version. So I have the newest version, but I can downgrade to other versions. And there, at the moment, there is no pre-release, but there are 3 snapshots. So when I enable that, I also see the snapshots here. I can also disable the releases, for example, so I then only have the snapshot. So you can deal with all different kind of updates and don't have to change the provider, the extension provider in any way. The same thing we did for the update provider itself. Before you had to define different update providers for releases and snapshots. Now that is combined. You see, at the moment there are 6 releases for this version, and I see I can downgrade to these releases, but there are also pre-releases. So when I enable that, you see I also see then the pre-releases. I can disable the release. I don't only want to see the pre-releases, or of course there are a lot of snapshots, so I can only enable the snapshots. So I can pick a certain snapshot. So I have the overview of what is available without have to change the update provider as I had to do before. So in my opinion, a big improvement here. And there are a lot of smaller things that changed in the administrator as well. For example, you get here more information in the bundle overview, and you can also sort by clicking on the title to get the better overview of the data. And you also, in that case, you have now information when it was created, and there's a lot of more information here. So that's about the administrator, what changed in the administrator. We also changed the the debugging. We extended the debugging that you not only get the debugging output, that it also has 2 additional tabs now. That looks like this. So you see, you have next to the debugging tab what is the old look and view of the debugging as you had before. You now have 2 additional tabs. You have the metrics tab, what gives you the same information that you had in the administrator overview page. So you see the different graphs, and in addition you can here see information about the memory and so on. Then you have the tab reference that give you the Lucee documentation. So you can tip in here when you search for something and you get that information and the documentation. Or of course you can also browse the information. So all so you don't have to go to another page to get this information. It's all here. What we also added to the admin is information about the tag CFABORD. Maybe this happened to you already. It happened for sure to me that I have somewhere in my code a CFABORD and I have no clue where that board is. So it will be helpful that the debugging gives us information about where the abort is happening. And that is exactly what we did. So when you go to when you do a CF abort in your code, you get in the debugging output, you get this output. You get the abort and you see, okay, abort in abort CFM on line 4. What is also possible is to add custom information to the debugging output. So you maybe want to have a framework and you want to add information to the debug about your framework. That's now also very easily possible. And that looks in the code like this. So you see, I have here, I use the function debug at, and I make a category. In that case, I call the category new in Lucee 5.3, and I add a struct with a key value pairs and with information to that category. Here, I can add stuff to that existing category, so I do a debug at again, same category and a new key value pair. When I execute that, you see now you get in the debug output, you have new in Lucee 5.3 debugging this is information we added. We also have reduced the memory footprint of Lucee. We did that in 3 steps. First, we moved core functionality to extensions. These extensions are installed by default, so you don't lose any functionality. You still can do everything, but of course you can uninstall this extension if you don't need that functionality. And the benefit of having that stuff in an extension is that an extension is only loaded when used. So as long as you don't use, for example, the image stuff, you don't it doesn't get loaded into memory. So that's the benefit of moving that to an extension. The second thing is that we no longer bundle external XML parsers and transformers with Lucee. Before we always had Xerxes and Xalong bundled, and these are a couple of Java libraries that need a lot of memory. And now we use the libraries coming from the JRE itself, so they are already there, so we don't have to add additional libraries. So this also reduces the memory footprint. And the third thing is that we have raised the minimal requirement for Java. So you have at least to have Java 8 to run Lucee. This helped us a lot that we can get rid of legacy functionality and making the code more smooth. And we also improved the performance of Lucee. We also did 3 things with that. So the first thing is that we did more specialized bytecode. Take as example the function for. This is a typical example of how you use the for statement. You have one variable, you define, you check against the max, and then you increment with your every step. So that's typical usage of that function. And of course, the for statement is much more generic. You can, for example, also do it in that way. So very different. And because of that, the bytecode that is generated for the for statement is very complicated and not that fast. And take as another example, the function, or sorry, the tag loop. That is very simple. You just define from and to and the step, and that's it. So very simple, and the bytecode we generate for that is much simpler and faster. And you see the loop and the for is more or less does the same, but bytecode generated for the for is slower because it's more generic. And what we did with Lucee 5.3, we detect when the for is used in a certain way, we improve the bytecode and make it more specialized to that one, and not have only one way to do it in a very, very generic way. That's just one example of different things we changed on statements and tags and so on that are often used in Lucee. And the second thing again is that we raised the minimal requirement for Java to 8 that allowed us to create other bytecode and more specialized bytecode for Java 8 that then also is shorter and faster. The third thing is that we changed a setting in the Lucee administrator that was by default true, which changed now to false. And that is that setting. You go to the to output in the admin, and you have the setting buffer tag body output. That means that when you, for example, have the tag cf silent, the body of that tag is buffered until the end. So when you, for example, do a cf abort then in the tag, you still get the output because it buffers the output. That makes the tag slower because it all has to buffer all the stuff you write until it reaches the end. But normally when you don't know, have no abort in the silent, in the end it simply throws away the buffer out the content, so it buffers for nothing in most cases. So that makes the tag unnecessarily slow. Next topic is about logging in Lucee. So far you could log to files or the console, and now Lucee 5.3 allows to log to a data source. That is very simple. Let's go to the admin, and here we go to the page logging. You see here all your logs. We take, for example, the application log. So at the moment you see it's on resource, so it logs to a file. When we go into detail view, we see here you have three choices. You can choose console, what logs to the console, and you have resource, what logs to the file, or newest data source. When you choose data source, you can here choose a certain data source. Let's say take test in that case. Then you define the name of the table that is created, call that my log, and then you can add a custom information that then will provide it with every log entry. For example, when you use one date table for more than one log, you then can provide the name of the log itself. So in that case I do call it application, but I can do also some another information, whatever. Now I save that, and now we produce some logs. Here we have the tag cf log. I define, okay, log to the application, and the text it should log. When I execute that, you see I get a log entry. We have here the name, that was the text we entered, and the custom information. Of course, this also works for other stuff, like when we throw an exception, that also get logged in the application scope, in application log. So when we execute that, then you get the exception, of course, but when we now disable it again and we call it, you see we have here etwas faul im Staate Dänemark. We have now the log entry from the exception. So now everything gets logged to the data source. Next topic is coding. So it's about what we changed in the code or in the language itself. We did here a couple of things. First of all, I have to say that we have a mantra that we try only to change things you can't do simply yourself. So we don't add a new array function. You could do a CFML-based function yourself with 4 lines of code. That really makes no sense. That just blows up the language. When we extend the language, we try to do stuff you can do yourself, or just with a lot of work, or not with very good code. So that's always our main focus on adding new features to the language. The first thing is the mail listener. The mail listener can listen to when a mail was sent. So after a mail was sent, a closure is called, or it can also be a component that then get, so you know that the function, the mail was sent or not. At the moment when you send a mail, you can go to the admin and you see there with the task if there was a problem with sending the mails, but in the code you can't. So except you have the spooler disabled, was also not is a very good thing when you send a lot of mails. So let's take a simple example. We here have a CFMail tag where I send a simple mail, and in the application CFC I'm adding this code. So we have here this mail.listener, then we have a closure that outputs all the arguments passed into the functions, and arguments detail what is one of these arguments. Storing that and calling the index.cfm. It's now executed. As you saw, this writes the system out, so to the console. So when you now watch the console, you see we now have this output. We see that it was called, and you see here all the arguments. One of them, of course, is passed, what is a boolean. So you see was the mail successfully sent or not, and you get in the detail, you get the subject, from, to, all information from the mail. So you can now store a flag in the data source or React or whatever you like to do. So you now know what happens with your mails. Second is Aerosol Encryption. You know, Lucee comes with different kind of encryption, so you can encrypt strings and binaries with different encryptions. And what Aerosol Encryption is not simply a new kind of encryption. When you see, I have here, first of all, I have the function generate aerosol keys. When I call that, you see we don't get one key, we get two. We get a private key and a public key. That's the idea of Aerosol Encryption. You can encrypt with a private key, then you can only decrypt with the public key. Or you can encrypt with the public key, but then you can only decrypt with the private key. The idea behind is that you only give out the public key and you keep the private key for yourself. So nobody then can produce or read the stuff. So when you have use the private key to encrypt, you only can decrypt, but you yourself cannot encrypt. That's, for example, good when you want to do a license file, or there are a lot of other examples. Let's see how that looks like. Here I have an example where I have the raw text here. Then I encrypt that raw text with the private key, and then I decrypt with the public key. and you see here I have the encrypted value and the decrypted value. When I execute that, you see here I have the encrypted value, then here the decrypted value, and it's impossible for me to for example, when I have used the other key to decrypt, so you only can use that key. So when I use that one, for example, and try that, I get a decryption error, so that doesn't work. And as I said, you can also use the other way around. So in that case, I use the public key to encrypt, so everybody that has the public key can encrypt, but nobody can decrypt. When I execute that, get similar result, the encrypted string, and then again the decrypted string. And again, I can't use the public key to decrypt, I only can use it to encrypt. So when I do that, I again get a decryption error. As you see, it's a very handy feature to handle encryption, decryption stuff in a new way. Okay, the last thing is how you can handle extension. As you saw, we have 3 new extensions with Lucee 5.3, and we already had a lot of them, and in the future we plan to have even more. So an extension get more and more important in Lucee, and because of that we also extended how you can read and write and update and delete extension in Lucee. And here's how it's done. First of all, maybe you are already familiar with it. We have the component administrator. This component is auto-imported in every script, so you always can use it. You don't have to import it. It's always there. And with the administrator component, you first define the type. You want the web administrator or the server administrator, and the password, what in my case simple is server. So now this gives me a lot of functionality with the administrator. When I now, for example, I can get all extension providers. You can have different extension provider that provides extension. You define that in the admin. We go to the admin, and you have here with extension you have providers. And you see at the moment I have a local one and the Lucee extension provider. So when I execute that, you see I get these 2 extension providers. Next thing is listing all extensions. So I can do with the CF admin, I can get extensions. When I execute that, I get all extensions that are installed in the web context. So that's only one, and I can also list all extensions that are installed in the server context. So get server extensions. When I call that, you see there are more. That's all extensions that are installed in the server context. And mostly that's a little bit complicated. So you need the password for the administrator to list that. So there's an easier way to do that. You can simply call the function extension list instead. That doesn't need the admin component. It's simply a function. When you call that one, you see it's similar to the server extension, but it holds all extension, including the web extension. You see you have here type, then it's server, and maybe it's in the end. Here is web, so here you get here also the web extension. You have extension list gives you all extension on the system. And you can not only list the extensions that are installed on the system, you can also install extensions. For that, I again need the component administrator. Then it has the function update extensions, and update extension needs the ID of the extension. The ID you simply see in the Lucee administrator when you go to the extensions, for example EH extension, or this one. You always see the ID in the detail views. You see here, okay, that's the ID. You simply can copy paste it. Or on the Lucee download page on the download.lucee.org, you have listed the extensions here, and there you always get also the ID of the extension. Like here, for example, you can also take it from here. So back to the code, you see, okay, I update the extension. I don't define a version, so it will simply grab the latest version from the extension provider. So in that case, it will install for me MongoDB. That's the ID from MongoDB. So I removed the code above here. And then here we list, after we have installed the extension, we list again all extensions, and there is another function that is called extension exists that return, then I can give the ID and will return me if this extension is installed on the system or not. So when we execute that, it will take a while. The first time it looks for the extension. Okay, the problem here is that's nice to see. We wanted to install the extension in the web admin. We have administrator web, but that is a server extension. So it says me that I can only install that in the server context. So I have to change this to server so that we install it in the server context. The password in my case for the server admin is the same, it's server. So now I execute it again. The first time it will always check if that extension is available locally, and if so, it will use from local. If not, it will upload it from the extension provider. When we now search for MongoDB, you see we now have that version installed. And what we also can do is install instead of install the latest version, we can also install a specific version. So when I remove that, and I say, okay, I want to have this version, not 59 as it was installed. I also changed that to server. Okay, now I do the same, but now we install an older version. It again takes a little bit of time because it has to download it, and then when it is done, we should get here, we should have 52. Okay, you see now we have installed the 3.252 and it exists. So in that case, we downgrade to that certain version. And of course, we can also remove the extension again. In that code, I simply call the method remove extension. Then I list again the extensions and I again check if the extension exists. So when we execute that, then you see when we now search for MongoDB, it's gone. There's no MongoDB anymore, and extension exists now return false. So that's how you handle extensions with Lucee 5.3. And of course there's more. The tag CF query is part of Coldfusion since version 1, and it's still a very important tag. So we think about how we could improve that tag without messing it up. And what we did is we add a new attribute called asqual, so that you can, instead of passing the asqual as in the body of the tag, you can pass it as a variable with the attribute asqual. So that's the regular example of a that's the regular example of a query where you have the asqual in the body. When we execute that, you get the result as expected, but you can also do it with Lucee 5.3 this way. So instead of passing the asqual in the body, you pass it with the attribute asqual. So when we execute that, twice the same. So you see now we have the asqual here. That the example maybe is not that good, but here, for example, is we do the same in script. We have here the Lucee syntax for script tags where we pass the asqual here, or we have here the ACF syntax and we pass the asqual here as well. So when you execute that, you see we get the same result in all cases. So, and of course then, for example, maybe you make your asqual somewhere else, and then at the end you can simply pass it into the tag and execute it. So, my opinion, very helpful feature that you don't longer have to pass it somewhere in the body in that case. Last thing is the FTP resource. The FTP resource is that you can use FTP as a virtual file system in Lucee. So far you could do it like this. So you have the FTP prefix, then you define username and password as part, so the connection string. Then you have the FTP server, and then you can do a directory list on that. So when you do that, you have one problem, that it always shows all this information here in the listening, because that's part of the pass. And but this has the username and password in it, so you don't want to have that. So maybe you want to have more something like this, that it only shows FTP. And the same as with S3, you now can define the FTP credentials in the application CFC. So that then looks like this. So you defined this FTP, then you have the credentials. You can also define the host and the port in the application CFC. So when we execute that, so we have just FTP, and we make a directory list. We get now a listening of on the server. And we can also we can also mix that. For example, here I still take the credential from the application CFC, but I define the host and the port as part of the pass. So when I do that and execute again, you see, because it's part of the pass, you also see it here now. So it's no longer coming from the application CFC. Next topic is Coldfusion 2018. As you maybe know, Adobe recently released the beta version of Coldfusion 2018. Luckily, a lot of functionality they introduced we already support in Lucee, so there's nothing to do in Lucee to be compatible. First thing is supporting closures outside CF script. Coldfusion so far only supported closures within CF script, but not for as anywhere where you can do an expression, for example, attribute value from a tag. Lucee always supported that, so there was never a limitation as you had in Adobe Coldfusion, so there is no concern there. The next thing is support for abstract components and method. Lucee also already supports that. Same with final components and methods, that's already supported by Lucee. Same with option and semicolons, that you can not necessarily have to define semicolons in your CF script code. That is already supported in Lucee for a while. Same with supporting other cache engines next to EHCache. Lucee is supporting that from the beginning. We never limited us to EHCache. We always did an open interface that you can do other caches, and we already support a couple of different caches. And of course, you can that interface is open. You can do your own cache engine, as for example Orchard Solution did. And full null support, we also support that as well. That you can enable or disable that with a flag, but that is already support with a certain limitation. I will come back to that later. And data type preservation is also something that was supported in Lucee from the beginning. We never had that. When you define a literal in ACF, it is converted to a string, and or sorry, when you define a literal number or a literal boolean, is always converted to a string. Lucee never did that, and that caused a lot of problems in the past with ACF, and finally they changed how that works. But Lucee was working that way from the beginning, so no concern there. Name it argument with built-in function, we also supported for a very long time. We even participated that ACF will come up with that in the future, and because of that we added support that we can define alias names. So when they use different names, we simply can define an alias and to match the names they use. Member functions on string literals we all already support for a long time, so that's nothing new there as well. And also this function they added array first, array last, query delete column, and query delete row we already support. But of course there are also some features we don't support, and we already added to Lucee 5.3. First is that the null support feature in Lucee was a compiler option, so you could only set that in the administrator, but not in the application CFC. But because ACF supported in the application CFC, we of course had to improve Lucee to match that. Now you can use in Lucee this null support true to enable or disable that feature. So that looks like that. You simply define in the application CFC null support like true. You can also do, that is the name ACF uses, that is also supported in uses. You can also do enable null support like null. We make that as well because we don't like to have the word enable in the attribute name. It shouldn't be only null supported. Nowhere where you set a flag in the application CFC we use the word enable. It really makes no sense. But for compatibility reason we support that as well, but officially for Lucee it's null support equals true. And you can of course always use instead of defining it in the application CFC, you can also always use the tag CF application to define it, and with action update you can update the current application context and then you set it. So take this example. I defined the variable, the value null to the variable x, and then I dump it. And when I execute that, you see I get null, That works fine. When I go now back to, and I disable that feature, and execute again, it throws an exception because it doesn't know null. If you want to know more about null support in Lucee, there's another video about that that gives you more detail. Next is the name-it arguments. As I said, Lucee supports name-it arguments for a long time, but of course ACF used different names for these arguments. So we checked them. They have had a list of all the arguments they have, and we added alias to Lucee to match this name, so that you can use the same names in Lucee as you can use in ACF. So we already matched that, so that it's working. And they added member functions for numbers. We also added them as well. And the last thing is typed arrays. So you can make a type specific array. Take this example. You see here I have define an array. I write the values, first a number into it, then I append a struct, and then I dump that array. When I execute that, you see I have the array with a number and a struct inside, so nothing special. But now I can define a typed array. So now I do more or less the same, but in that case I define the array with the function array new, and say the type is string. So it should only allow strings, or things it can convert to a string. So a number it can convert to a string, but a struct it can't convert to a string. So when I execute that, you see I get an exception with array append. That struct can cause complex object struct to a string, so I can't convert it. When I remove that and execute again, you see now it was working. It also has converted the number I've passed into a string, and the dump also tells me that this is type string. When I change the type, for example, I say, okay, I want to have a boolean array, only booleans in that array, and I execute again. You see now it has converted the number 1 to boolean true, and the type is boolean now. And what is different here to ACF, that's very important. ACF has defined, instead of the syntax we have here, that we simply can pass the type into array new, they have a very special syntax that you have the type before the arguments. Before you pass the arguments, you have the type here before. In my opinion, they adapted that from the generic type with Java, but in my opinion, it doesn't really make sense with Coldfusion or CFML, because you only have that with array. You should have everywhere. So when you want to define generic types, you should be able to do that everywhere and not only that place. Then you could discuss about it, but only having there, that syntax don't really make sense. And with Lucee, there is another problem. When you, for example, when you call a component method, you have, for example, comp, and I say get name, and I call it that way, then I always can use, instead of the dot notation, I can use the bracket notation. So I can instead make this, and it still works. That's very nice to do for when you want to have pass the name dynamically. So you can call it this, and the parser cannot distinguish that syntax from that one. It's the same for the parser. So for Lucee, that is not working because Lucee is supporting this. I will do a video in more details about this notation and how you can use it. But that's the problem, we can't use this. It's still in beta, and I hope they will change their mind until the final release. We will see, and we will then decide how we handle that in our final release. But doesn't really, that syntax really don't make sense in my opinion. So last topic is backward compatibility. What you have to think about when you update to Lucee 5.3. There are only really two problems. First of all is the flag with buffer body. We looked before into it, and when you have the CF silent, that it now acts differently. You have to, maybe you have to change that flag in the admin, but in most cases you don't. And the second thing is that you need Java 8 to run it. So when you're still on Java 8, you first have to update to Java 8. You always see in the overview page in the admin, you always see the version you are running. So you see in my case, I run Java 1.8. 1.8, that means that's Java 8. That they have different ways to show their version number, but the second tickets count. So it's version 8 I'm running. So you can see there what you're running. When you have Java 8 there, you are fine. You can update and take care of that one. Otherwise, there should be no problems. Please, if you have any issues, please report in Jira or on dev.lucee.org. We will look into it as fast as possible. I hope this video was interesting to you. Have a good one.